who have been the political backbone of the Rajapaksas. This is what they said today.
The president allowed for the protest to take place peacefully, but it turned out violent in the end. After the violence, what the president is saying is that we must go to the IMF and solve this, because when we, as citizens, go to obtain a loan, they ask for 2 guarantors. So in the same way, when a country asks for a loan, they ask for guarantors. We are drowning in debt, so we don't have guarantors coming forward on our behalf at the moment. That is why the president believed financial assistance from other countries would help us come out of this situation instead. Until then, we must be patient.
We're drowning in debt. We don't have any guarantors. These words should worry the government. Buddhist monks are a very powerful group in Sri Lanka. They have influence over Sinhalese Buddhists. They're a core vote bank of the Rajapaksas. They make up 75% of Sri Lanka's population, the Sinhalese Buddhists. In the 2019 election, the monks propelled the Rajapaksas to victory. And now they sound unhappy, criticizing the government over its handling of the economy. 2 monks have also written a letter to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. This letter has 14 suggestions and one key demand: ease the economic suffering, provide relief to the people of Sri Lanka. At the center of this firestorm is this man, Basil Rajapaksa, the finance minister of Sri Lanka, also a brother of the president and the prime minister. He is being blamed for driving Sri Lanka's economy into the ground. Critics say they saw it coming though. Basil Rajapaksa's reputation precedes him. In the past, he's been accused of corruption and embezzlement. His detractors call him Mr. 10%. They say he demands a 10% commission for every project. This was part of a WikiLeaks report. It was based on a US diplomatic cable from 2007. I had that cable with me, and this is what the then American ambassador to Sri Lanka wrote about Basil Rajapaksa. Let me quote from the cable. Embassy contacts say Basil has no close advisors and more enemies than friends in Sri Lanka because he makes a habit of trying to buy people. Basil worked for the Ministry of Mahaveli Development, where he earned the nickname Mr. 10% for demanding a 10% commission on every project. Basil continues to be accused of significant corruption in his current position. This is what the US ambassador wrote back in 2007. Now, the same man, Basil Rajapaksa, will lead the bailout talks. Reports say he will travel to Washington, D.C. next month. Colombo is in talks with both the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Sri Lanka needs help from both these agencies. Its foreign debt has ballooned to $51 billion. And this year alone, Sri Lanka has to pay back at least $7 billion. They don't have this money. They're barely making ends meet, running out of essentials, running short of money for essentials. Recently, India gave a $1.5 billion credit line to Sri Lanka. This was to buy fuel. Colombo has now sought another credit line of $1 billion. This is for the import of essential goods. Quick question. Where is China in all of this? For the longest time, the Rajapaksas banked on China. So what is China now doing to help Sri Lanka? Not very much. China has turned its back on Sri Lanka, it seems. Colombo made 2 requests to Beijing. The first one was a credit line of $2.5 billion. The second one was to restructure its overall debt. Change the terms of the debt so that payment becomes easier. There's no default. China has not agreed to either. No commitment so far. You know how much money Sri Lanka owes China? More than $10 billion. It's a very difficult situation. Credit lines can only help you so far. The way out is a bailout. And Sri Lanka needs it fast. Delaying a bailout only raises the risk of more violence, more instability. The economic crisis is morphing into a humanitarian crisis, and Sri Lanka needs urgent help. Across the strait, there is a different sort of buzz in India, the buzz of diplomacy. First to arrive were the Western diplomats. They came to lobby for India's support in Ukraine. In simple words, they failed. Because the West brought its favorite cocktail, equal parts of threats and lectures. This disaster set the stage for India's second guest, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. He arrived in New Delhi on Thursday, and today he got down to business. Lavrov's first meeting was with his Indian counterpart, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. They had a lot to talk about: Afghanistan, Iran, the Indo-Pacific, but needless to say, the big focus was Ukraine. Lavrov's second meeting was with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Apparently, he was carrying a personal message from Vladimir Putin. Now, this meeting has a special significance. In the last 2 weeks, 5 foreign ministers have visited New Delhi from Austria, Greece, China, Britain, and Russia. 5. Only the Russian foreign minister got an audience with Prime Minister Modi, and that tells you how much New Delhi has invested in its relationship with Moscow. The Russian foreign minister had twin missions in Delhi, one to say thank you. Unlike the West, India is not dealing in rhetoric. It is looking for a solution, and Lavrov appreciated this position by New Delhi.
Indeed, as you mentioned, this day our Western colleagues would like to reduce any meaningful international issue to the crisis in Ukraine. You know our position. We do not hide anything, and we appreciate that India is taking this situation in the entirety of facts, not just in a one-sided way.
Mission number 2 is trickier, convincing India to do more business with Russia. And on this, Lavrov is categorical. Anything India wants to buy, Russia is ready to sell. Listen in.
I mentioned about the oil supplies and the supplies of high technology. If India wants to buy anything from us, we are ready to discuss and to reach mutually acceptable forms of cooperation.
You see, Russia is desperate. They badly need a new market for their energy, and they're hoping India will step up. Now, just to be clear, India has not taken up any of these offers. Rupee, ruble, oil discounts, all of them are under consideration. They've not signed on the dotted line. But then came Dalip Singh. He is America's Deputy National Security Advisor. Slick hair, broad smile, and zero understanding of foreign policy. Dalip Singh thought the best way to sway India was using threats. Let me read out what he said. The more leverage that China gains over Russia, the less favorable that is for India. I don't think anyone would believe that if China once again breached the line of actual control, that Russia would come running to India's defense. Well, here's a question for Mr. Diplomacy, Dalip Singh. Did America come running to India's defense? The answer is no. India fought alone for her territorial integrity, just like Ukraine is fighting right now. In both cases, America just gave moral support and nothing more. By the way, Dalip Singh did not stop there. He had another warning for India, this time on buying Russian oil. Let me read out what he said. What we would not like to see is a rapid acceleration of India's imports from Russia as it relates to energy or any other exports that are currently being prohibited by the US or by other aspects of the international sanctions regime. Now, two possibilities here. One, Dalip Singh is out of his depth. He's talking about things that are way over his pay grade. Or two, America is changing its strategy. Perhaps India's neutrality is making them impatient. Either way, this is not going to help the Western campaign. India's neutrality is based on national interest, on independent thinking. Threats and lectures will not make things better. They will only make things worse. Also think about the audacity. Europe continues to buy Russian gas. Nobody says a thing. But India scoops up discounted oil and suddenly there are threats and lectures. S. Jaishankar talked about this hypocrisy on Thursday. He said it looks like a campaign against India.
We've seen for some time what looks almost like a campaign on this issue. Now, I was just reading a report today that in the month of March, Europe has bought, I think, 15% more oil and gas from Russia. We ourselves get the bulk of our energy supplies from the Middle East, about 7.5%, 8% of our oil from the US. In the past, maybe less than 1% from Russia. When oil prices go up, I think it's natural for countries to go out into the market and look for what are good deals for their people.
Both Russia and the West need to understand one thing. India's foreign policy is not for sale. You cannot threaten India into criticizing Russia. Neither can you lure India with cheap oil. Just think about it. As we speak, Russia is waging a war over so-called national interests. America has done the same for decades. Why should India be any different? If you want to sway New Delhi, you must come up with concrete proposals. Proposals that benefit India's interests. And most importantly, try not sending novices like Dalip Singh. And talking about India's interests, trade is one of them. Russia is offering discounted goods to India, oil, gas, coking coal. Every deal is being sweetened by Moscow. And looking at this volatile market, it's a great offer. The question is, how will these purchases happen? Most Russian banks have been sanctioned. They cannot use the SWIFT payment system. Same story with foreign reserves. Half of Russia's forex has been frozen. That's around $300 billion. How does this impact trade? You see, most international trade happens in dollars. You pay in dollars, you receive in dollars. It's been like that for decades. But Russia's dollar reserves have been frozen. It cannot pay in greenbacks anymore. So what is the solution? One option is to trade in local currency. It's called the rupee-ruble system. How does that work? I'll give you a simple explanation. Russia pays in rupees, India pays in rubles. Basically, remove the dollar from the equation. I know it sounds easy, but setting up the system is hard work. Step one is coordinating between banks. Russian banks will have to open accounts in an Indian bank and vice versa. Indian banks will have to open accounts in a Russian bank. So the platform is set. Step two is holding reserves. Both sides will have to hold a certain amount of money in these accounts, say $200 million, for example. But there's a catch. This reserve cannot be held in dollars. It must be held in local currency. So in this example, Russian banks must hold the equivalent of $200 million. That's more than 1,500 crore rupees. So you've got the platform, you've got the money, now you can trade easily. This is how the rupee-ruble system would work. Russia will pay Indian exporters in rupees, India will pay Russian exporters in rubles. Has this been tried before? Yes, it has. We can think of two high-profile examples. One during the Cold War, India and the Soviet Union traded in local currency. The idea was exactly the same, to work around Western restrictions. And two, in 2012, that's more recent. This was with Iran. And this time, India created a rupee-rial system. Iran was sanctioned by Western powers, so India began buying Iranian oil in local currency. And things were working well. Then came a certain Donald Trump. He imposed specific sanctions on Iranian oil, and so the rupee-rial trade lost momentum. You can see why Russia is pushing for the system. They desperately need to sell their oil, and right now, India is their best bet. Let me give you a sample of how desperate Russia is. They're offering a discount of $35 per barrel, and that too not on current prices. This $35 discount per barrel is on oil prices before the war. So you can imagine how lucrative this deal is. Speaking in New Delhi, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made a renewed push for rupee-ruble trade today. Listen in.
Yeah, I mentioned already just about rubles and rupees. This process is ongoing for many years. And the reason for moving to national currencies is, again, absolutely unreliable nature of our Western counterparts. We don't want to depend on a system which could be closed anytime. And we don't want to depend on the system whose masters can steal your money overnight.
Which brings us to the most important question. Why hasn't India taken up the offer? If rupee-ruble has been tried before, if the discounts are so attractive, then what's stopping us? Why is India hesitating? Two reasons. Number one, the ruble's free fall. Before the war, both currencies were almost equal. 1 ruble was almost equal to 1 rupee. Now there is no stability. In early March, the ruble collapsed. 1 ruble was equal to half a rupee. It has recovered since, but you see the problem here. Suppose the rupee-ruble system is implemented. India deposits millions of billions of rubles in Russian banks. What happens next? What if the ruble collapses further? This money in the Russian bank will lose value. You can see why it's a risky affair. Reason number two is politics. Rupee-ruble is not just a financial commitment. It's a political statement. It's a declaration that India will buy more Russian goods. So how will America react to that? A few minutes back, we told you that America's Deputy National Security Advisor said what he said. He set red lines for India's imports from Russia. Such statements complicate matters. It's a question of risk versus reward. Is the cheap oil worth risking a Western backlash? So far, India has put oil first. Take a look at these numbers. In 2021, India bought 16 million barrels of oil from Russia. That's 16 million in 12 months. This year, 13 million barrels already. And we have 9 months left in this year. So as we keep saying, this is all about national interest. Why should Indians pay for a war that NATO and Russia created? Rupee ruble may or may not go through, but India has made one thing clear. It will not sacrifice lucrative deals for someone else's war. Speaking of war, in Pakistan, the Prime Minister is fighting for survival. You know what's playing out there. A Prime Minister struggling to cling on to power. Opposition leaders are coming together to take him down. There is a supposed threat to his life. A threat letter is apparently doing the rounds. There are emotionally charged addresses on live television. And a Super Sunday the country is eagerly waiting for. In 2 days from now, Imran Khan will face a trust vote. The Pakistani Prime Minister has already declared the result. He says those who vote against him will be called traitors. Those who vote against him will be voting against Pakistan. In an exhaustive address to the nation, the former cricketer cried foreign conspiracy. American conspiracy to be specific, before retracting. He said America was punishing him for pursuing an independent foreign policy, for flying to Russia. Now you and I know better. Forget independent foreign policy. In Pakistan, even domestic policy is not independent. It is not shaped in Islamabad. It is decided in Rawalpindi, at the headquarters of the Pakistani army. The army has been running Pakistan for decades now. You must have heard commentators say that Pakistan is not a country with an army, but an army with a country. So where is that army now? Are they missing in action? Or are they acting behind the scenes? Well, here's what we know so far. Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa paid Imran Khan a visit at his home. With him was the ISI Chief, Nadeem Anjum. This was on the 30th of March, the day Imran Khan was originally scheduled to address the nation. Reports say the army asked Imran Khan to not make that address. Well, we now know that he did it anyway, 1 day later though. And this was not the first meeting with the army chief during this crisis. They reportedly met on the 18th of March as well. What did Bajwa tell Imran Khan then? That the army would maintain neutrality in the no-confidence vote. That's good. But here's another way of looking at it. The army will not help Imran Khan. They will not bail him out. There are whispers in the corridors of power. The army has apparently dumped Imran Khan, the same man whom they'd picked in 2018. Experts say of all the Pakistani prime ministers, Imran Khan is the closest to the army. He, after all, is the selected PM. So why would the army try to get rid of him? Perhaps because he's been crossing the red line way too often. In 2019, Army Chief Bajwa sought a term extension, but there was a hiccup in Islamabad. The army took note. In 2021, the ISI chief was retiring. The army picked a replacement, but Imran Khan insisted that the old chief continue in office. Reports say there was a tiff over this between the Prime Minister and the army chief. This was strike two. By then, the army already had a list of complaints against Imran Khan. They were unhappy with the PTI's governance, its handling of the pandemic, and the growing distance between Islamabad and Rawalpindi. So soon after the ISI appointment fiasco, rumours of Imran Khan's exit began circulating. Then came reports that said that Imran Khan was trying to appoint a new army chief. Needless to say, this made matters worse. And what happened in the last few months has not helped Imran Khan. He burnt his bridge with Washington. He visited Russia the day the Kremlin invaded Ukraine. Ideally, it should not have bothered the army, given they themselves openly lean towards China. But experts say they wanted someone in Islamabad who at least had a hotline with the White House. Imran Khan is not that someone. He does not have the hotline. Remember, he's still waiting for Biden's phone call. It's a bit of an international joke now. So one thing's for sure, come Sunday, the army will not be neutral. Will they be backing Shehbaz Sharif then? Reports say he is the acceptable choice of the establishment now. So Bajwa is likely to be silently cheering for Sharif from the wings. Imran Khan knows the military's game all too well. He's decided to play till the last ball, he says.
नहीं उन्होंने ऑप्शंस दिए थे मुझे और वो ऑब्वियसली हमारी एस्टेब्लिशमेंट है उन्होंने ऑफर दी कि जी 3 चीज़ें हैं या आप अदम एतमाद का वोट चले जाएं या आप इस्तीफा दे दें और या इलेक्शन हमने कहा इलेक्शन सबसे बेहतर तरीका है इस्तीफा मैं कभी सोच भी नहीं सकता.
As we speak, he's spinning the foreign conspiracy theory. Reports say Pakistan summoned the US envoy. They lodged a protest. Washington has rubbished all the allegations. Ned Price is the spokesperson for the US State Department. He said there is no truth in this allegation that Washington is working with Pakistan's opposition to unseat Imran Khan.
Well, we are closely following developments in Pakistan, and we respect and we support Pakistan's constitutional process and the rule of law. But when it comes to those allegations, there is no truth to them.
I wouldn't vouch for how big of a player Washington is in this game. It's actually Imran Khan versus the army, and Sunday will decide which side wins. Pakistan watchers will likely put their money on Rawalpindi. For the moment, let's turn to China and China's Wuhan virus crisis. Shanghai's healthcare system has collapsed. Serious lapses have led to deaths of patients, and China is doing what it does best, cover up. Despite those efforts, some shocking stories have emerged. The Wuhan virus has hit elderly care hospitals. Now, here's something that you may not know. Shanghai has hundreds of such hospitals, elderly care hospitals, and now they've become Wuhan virus hotspots. You know what the official death toll for such hospitals is? 0. The local government is reporting 0 deaths. And we can tell you it's a lie. Chinese citizens are contesting these claims on social media. Recently, dead bodies were removed from a facility. At least 100 patients have tested positive here. The staff is narrating horror stories. One of them was tasked with dressing a dead body, a COVID casualty. Another staff member said he saw several cars outside a hospital. They were there to transport the dead. How many? We cannot say. No one knows for sure. How many people have died? Shanghai's health system is overwhelmed. People are dying from other ailments too, or complications, because hospitals are refusing treatment. And the lapses are shocking. Last week, a nurse in Shanghai died, not from the Wuhan virus, but from asthma. The nurse was denied treatment. She was turned away by her own hospital. Do you know why? Because the emergency room was closed. Not because they were treating Wuhan virus patients. The emergency room was closed for disinfection. It's unbelievable. Another patient, a man, died due to kidney failure this week. Once again, he was denied care. His daughter took a bold decision. She decided to speak out on social media, Chinese social media, and she questioned local authorities. And I have a copy of her statement with me here. Let me tell you what she said. My father's tragic death is irreversible. I hope that his passing will prompt authorities to improve the system and assure every patient gets timely assistance. Life-saving treatments are being denied for trivial reasons. I have one more story. This is of a 77-year-old man. He contracted the Wuhan virus but died due to kidney failure. All this happened at a hospital because doctors apparently refused to perform a dialysis. They kept moving the patient from one facility to another until he died. The patient's son has spoken out. And this is the statement that he gave out. It never would have occurred to me that my dad would die of some people's negligence rather than the Omicron variant. This is something we still can't get over. The public anger is growing. Authorities in Shanghai are failing on every front and they fail to ensure care for patients. They've also failed to ensure food supplies. There is panic buying. Take a look at this. Empty shelves, long queues, people fighting for food supplies and mass hoarding. Let me assure you, these videos are not from 2020. They're from 2022. This year, they went viral last week. A hashtag is going viral on Chinese social media. It says, it is really difficult to buy groceries in Shanghai. That's the hashtag. It's got 40 million hits on Weibo, 40 million. That's China's substitute for Twitter, Weibo. The people in Shanghai are panicking.
I'm feeling very insecure and hearing a lot of rumors on the outside. Like we are short of this today and we need to rush to buy them. The price of goods is rising and the people are panicking.
I didn't think it will be so serious. Every single detailed aspect of our lives from clothing, food, living and commuting has been affected by the lockdown. I'm panicking to some extent. I don't feel optimistic, to be honest.
China is witnessing its worst Wuhan virus outbreak since 2020. The rest of the world was able to manage the Omicron wave, but China is struggling because of its poor strategies and poorer vaccines. And now for the French presidential election. We are tonight talking about a presidential hopeful, Eric Zemmour. They call him France's Donald Trump. He's 63 years old, anti-migrant, anti-Muslim, anti-burqa. Zemmour hero worships Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and this is the first time he's running for president. He may not win this race, but he's a very important candidate nonetheless, and I will tell you why. His extreme right politics makes Marine Le Pen, France's far-right candidate and President Emmanuel Macron's biggest challenger, look moderate and good. Here's a report.
Who is Eric Zemmour? A quick Google search will give you a primer. Maybe even set you up for disappointment. The man is Jewish, but a Holocaust denier. His supporters are unruly. And this is how Eric Zemmour looks. He is 63 years old, he has no election experience, but now he is running for office. Zemmour rang in the election month with a visit to a market in the outskirts of Paris. He praised the workers and, for God alone knows what reason, used their early rising habits to beat Macron over his McKinsey controversy.
I came to Rungis to see the France that gets up early, the craftsmen, the morning workers, because that's the France I defend, the France I love. A far cry from either the France of the welfare state or the France of profiteers. I like the France of Rungis and not the France of Macron and McKinsey. This is the history of France. If the history of France stops, as it will stop if we continue with this immigration, then you won't have all that anymore. It will all be in disarray.
Zemmour blames migrants and Muslims for what he calls the decline of France. The man has been convicted of hate speech one too many times. The recent conviction was in January. A court found Zemmour guilty of racist hate. He has said that migrant children were thieves, killers, rapists. We should send them back. Zemmour's stand on migration and Muslims is clear. Goes without saying, his politics is far right. During a recent rally, he shared a secret with his followers.
Today at Trocadero, I have come to deliver a secret. We are the only ones to be right in this campaign. We are the only inheritors of the right who love France, the people, work, order and identity.
Time for some background now. Zemmour was a journalist. He would take pride in positioning himself against quote-unquote politically correct consensus. Over time, he became a TV commentator. He once told a woman on live TV that her parents had no right to call her Zina. The man also wants a ban on the hijab. Also a ban on names that are not French enough. Zemmour became a familiar face in 2021. That's courtesy his book tour, when he left no page unturned to promote his anti-migrant and anti-Muslim views. He also said that fears of the Wuhan virus were overblown. Now, if you are thinking Zemmour sounds like Donald Trump, then you're right. Critics call him France's Trump, but the 63-year-old thinks he has more in common with Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Why? Because Johnson too started his career in media. But that does not mean Zemmour does not aspire to be a Trump. He once told the media that Trump had, quote-unquote, succeeded in uniting the working class and the patriotic bourgeoisie. That's what I've been dreaming about for 20 years, he added. Zemmour's list of icons also includes Russian President Vladimir Putin. The presidential hopeful once said he was dreaming of having a French Putin. Will his dream come true? What are Zemmour's chances of making it to office? If polls are to be believed, Zemmour's chances of becoming president are very, very slim.
In geopolitics, everyone is a crusader. The brave knights fighting for what is right. That is until the crusade hits home. Then, it's every knight for himself. Case in point, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Let me take you back to 2018. Journalist Jamal Khashoggi was brutally murdered at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. His body was hacked into pieces. It was barbaric, it was cold-blooded, and we all know who did it. The intelligence trail leads to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Back then, Donald Trump was US President. He prized his relationship with the kingdom, so Trump gave MBS a free pass. But Erdogan did not. He had a long list of grudges against Saudi Arabia. Erdogan supported the Muslim Brotherhood. Saudi Arabia did not. Erdogan allied himself with Qatar. Saudi and company blockaded Qatar. Erdogan also dreamt of leading the Muslim world. Again, Saudi Arabia stood in his way. All this tension boiled over in 2018. Erdogan had the perfect weapon against Riyadh. CCTV footage, intelligence trail. Everything led to the Saudi Crown Prince. It was Erdogan's personal crusade. Well, not anymore. Turkey is halting the trial of Saudi suspects in the Khashoggi murder, and that's not all. They want to transfer this case to Saudi Arabia, and we all know how that ends. Right now, 26 Saudi suspects are being tried in absentia. They're accused in the Khashoggi murder. If Turkey wants, it can continue the proceedings. It can sentence these people. But Erdogan has lost interest. His prosecutors say Riyadh requested to transfer the cases.